Pray the vultures get to you first, the chief mocked. A voice behind him. I always eat first. Kale had never seen a world so bleak. The dry, cracked earth stretched endlessly beneath a pale, ashen sky. There was no sign of life, save for the dust that swirled in the wind. He had been stranded here, alone and captured by the Vultures, a ruthless band of alien raiders who seemed to thrive on chaos and destruction. Their ship, a massive, jagged craft, loomed like a dark shadow in the distance, barely visible through the heat and haze. The Vultures had ambushed Kale's ship and taken him prisoner. They were known across the galaxy for their cruelty, and Kale knew he had to survive. He had no choice. His thoughts raced as the alien soldiers dragged him through the dirt. They had mocked him, stripped him of his weapons, and now they were taking him to their chief, Gorath. Gorath was a terrifying figure. Tall, with dark scales covering his massive form, the chief of the Vultures was feared by all who knew him. His reputation had spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire, a story of violence and brutality. Kale knew that this encounter wouldn't end well for him unless he fought back, but he had to bide his time. The Vultures' camp was surrounded by tents made of tough, alien material, and their technology was unlike anything Kale had seen before. The air smelled of smoke and rust, and the harsh sounds of metal clashing echoed in the distance as the Vultures trained for their next raid. Kale's heart pounded in his chest as they dragged him to a large stone platform at the center of the camp. Gorath stood tall, his dark eyes cold and unfeeling as he watched Kale approach. The chief was a giant compared to the others, his muscles bulging beneath the scars of countless battles. A cruel smile twisted his face as he eyed Kale, sizing him up like a predator considering its prey. Well, what do we have here? Gorath's voice was deep and gravelly, like the sound of rocks being crushed underfoot. A human? You think you can survive out here? Kale glared at the chief, his jaw clenched tight. He didn't answer, but his mind was racing. He couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. He had to be strong, even if it was the last thing he did. Gorath stepped forward, the earth trembling under his weight. He towered over Kale, who was kneeling on the platform, his hands bound tightly behind his back. The chief's breath smelled of blood and death, and Kale's stomach churned. The moment of reckoning had arrived. You humans always think you're so special, Gorath sneered. You think you're strong, that you can fight back against us, but you'll see. You'll learn just how fragile your kind really is. Kale's heart beat faster, but he stayed silent, refusing to give the Vultures the satisfaction of seeing him afraid. He had faced death before in the streets of his destroyed city, but this was different. The Vultures didn't just want to kill him, they wanted to break him. As Gorath raised his hand, signaling his soldiers to prepare for the sacrifice, Kale felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving something. Humanity had always been underestimated, but they had survived wars, plagues, and destruction. They had made it through the hardest of times. Kale knew that he was part of something bigger than himself. He wasn't just fighting for his own life, he was fighting for the future of humanity. The Vultures began chanting in their harsh, alien language, preparing their weapons. Kale had no weapons, no tools, no way to escape, but he had something that they didn't. He had the will to survive, and that he believed could carry him further than any weapon ever could. Just as one of the Vultures stepped forward to strike, a loud voice rang out across the camp. Pray the Vultures get to you first, the voice mocked. Kale's eyes snapped toward the sound. There, standing in the shadows of the camp's edge, was another figure, a human figure much like himself. The Vultures froze, turning to face the new arrival. I always eat first, the voice continued. The words were filled with a strange, confident energy that was like nothing Kale had heard before. The figure stepped forward, revealing a woman. She was tall, her movements fluid and sure. In her hands, she held a weapon that glinted in the dim light of the camp, a weapon unlike anything Kale had seen. The soldiers hesitated, confusion flashing in their eyes. The woman was calm, her expression focused. She surveyed the Vultures, and without a word, she moved into action. With speed and precision, she cut down the first Vulture that dared to move toward her. Her weapon sliced through the air like a blade of light, faster than Kale could follow. The alien fell to the ground, a surprised expression frozen on his face. The remaining soldiers hesitated. They had been expecting an easy kill, a simple sacrifice, but they had not counted on this. Kale watched, stunned, as the woman moved with deadly grace, cutting through the raiders one by one. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen, calm, composed, and utterly fearless. It was as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. One by one, the vultures fell, unable to keep up with her swift attacks. They tried to retaliate, but it was futile. The woman was a force of nature, unstoppable in her pursuit of justice. She reached Kale's side and cut the ropes binding his hands. "Come on, we're getting out of here," she said, her voice steady and calm. Kale blinked in disbelief. He had no idea who this woman was, but she had just saved his life. For a moment he hesitated, unsure whether to trust her. But the look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. She was here to help him, perhaps even to give him a chance at survival. As they turned to make their escape, Kale couldn't help but feel a strange sense of hope. He had never been so close to death, and yet in that moment he felt something stronger than fear. He felt alive. The woman led him through the camp, cutting down any vultures that tried to block their path. With each step, Kale realized that survival was no longer just about escaping the vultures. It was about proving humanity's strength. And with this woman by his side, he might just have a chance to do that. Kale and the mysterious woman moved swiftly through the chaos of the vultures' camp. The sounds of clashing metal and the growls of defeated soldiers echoed in the background as they weaved between tents and structures made from dark, alien materials. Kale's mind raced, trying to comprehend everything that had just happened. One moment he was bound and ready to be sacrificed, and the next he was free, running for his life with a woman who had appeared out of nowhere. "Who are you?" Kale asked breathlessly as they ran. The woman didn't immediately answer. Her focus was razor-sharp as she moved ahead, her weapon flashing in the dim light, cutting through the remaining vultures who dared to approach. She was a blur of motion, and Kale had a hard time keeping up with her pace. He had been through intense battles before, but this was unlike anything he had ever experienced. This woman wasn't just fighting to survive. She was fighting like a seasoned warrior, like someone who had been in countless battles and always won. "I'm someone who doesn't like leaving a job half done," she replied, her voice steady. "You can thank me later." Kale's mind was still trying to process her words, but he couldn't deny the fact that she had just saved him. She had taken on the entire vulture raiding party with ease, something Kale would have never imagined possible. He had always known humanity was strong, but this woman, she was something else. "Are you part of a larger group?" Kale asked, his curiosity finally overcoming his confusion. The woman glanced over at him as they rounded a corner, her expression unreadable. "That's none of your concern right now," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "What matters is that we get out of here." They reached the edge of the camp, where the sounds of the battle grew fainter. The woman paused for a moment, scanning the area around them. Kale, still struggling to catch his breath, took the opportunity to ask the question that had been on his mind since the moment she saved him. "Why did you help me?" Kale asked. "I don't even know who you are." The woman's gaze softened, though she still didn't stop moving. "Because you're human and humans don't belong on this planet." Her voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it, a sense of purpose. "The vultures have been hunting your kind for years, and it's time someone stood up to them." Kale didn't fully understand her words, but he could feel the weight of them. There was something behind her words, something deeper. He had heard rumors of resistance groups, of humans fighting back against the alien invaders. But he never imagined it would be like this, one human standing against an entire army fighting for freedom. "Why do you care about us?" Kale pressed, his curiosity getting the better of him. The woman stopped walking and finally turned to face him. There was a quiet intensity in her eyes, something Kale had seen in soldiers who had fought wars and lost everything. "Because," she said softly, "you may not know it yet, but you're part of something bigger. The war isn't just about survival anymore. It's about proving to the galaxy that humanity isn't something to be ignored, something to be wiped out." Kale was silent for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always fought to survive, to make it through another day. But the way she spoke, it was as if there was a future beyond just surviving, a future where humanity didn't just fight to live but fought to win. "I'm not sure I understand," Kale admitted, his voice low. The woman gave him a small, knowing smile. "You will. I'm not here to explain everything to you. I'm here to get you out of this mess." She motioned to the path ahead. "Follow me." They moved quickly, and as they got further away from the camp, Kale began to notice the silence. The chaotic sounds of battle were slowly fading, and for the first time since he had been captured, Kale felt a small flicker of hope. He had no idea where they were going, but he trusted this woman. She had saved him when it seemed like all was lost. After a few minutes, they came to a small clearing at the edge of the forest. The woman stopped and turned to Cale. "We're not safe yet," she said, scanning the area, "but we've bought ourselves some time." Cale finally caught his breath and looked around. The area was quiet, almost too quiet. It felt like they were the only two people left in the universe. The trees around them were tall and imposing, their branches swaying gently in the wind. For a moment, Cale felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. "Where are we going now?" Cale asked, his voice steady now that the immediate danger had passed. The woman looked at him, her expression serious. "There's a ship waiting for us. We need to reach it before the Vultures realize we've escaped, and once we're off this planet, we can figure out the next step." Cale nodded, though he still had questions. He had no idea who she was or what her mission was, but he knew one thing for sure: she wasn't like the others. She wasn't here to just survive, she was here to make a difference. "By the way," Cale said as they began walking again, "what's your name?" The woman didn't hesitate. "Tessa, Tessa," Cale repeated, letting the name settle in his mind. "Well, Tessa, thanks for the save." She nodded, a slight smirk playing at the corner of her lips. "Don't thank me yet, the real battle's just beginning." They moved through the forest, Cale still trying to wrap his mind around everything. He had gone from a prisoner, about to be sacrificed, to running through an alien planet with a mysterious woman who seemed to know exactly what she was doing. He had no idea what was coming next, but one thing was certain. His life had just taken a turn, and the road ahead was full of questions, danger, and, perhaps, hope. Cale followed Tessa through the dense forest, each step bringing them further from the Vultures' camp. The trees around them towered high, their leaves thick and green, forming a canopy that blocked out much of the sky. The air was cool and crisp, a welcome change from the oppressive heat of the Vultures' camp. Still, Cale couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in his chest. They were deep in enemy territory, and he didn't know where they were heading or what awaited them. He glanced at Tessa, walking with the same confident pace as before. She was a figure of quiet strength, every movement deliberate and purposeful. Cale couldn't help but wonder about her past, what had brought her to this point. She had saved his life, yes, but beyond that, she was a mystery. "So, what now?" Cale asked, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity that he couldn't ignore. "Where are we going?" Tessa didn't look back as she walked, but she spoke as though she had anticipated his question. "We're heading to a rendezvous point," she said, her voice steady. "There's a ship waiting for us. Once we get there, we can leave this planet and figure out the next step." Cale frowned, still unsure of the bigger picture. "And what's the next step?" Tessa paused for a moment, glancing over her shoulder at him. "You'll understand soon enough. But right now, the most important thing is to get off this planet before the Vultures realize what happened. We're not safe yet." The mention of the Vultures made Cale's stomach tighten. Even though they had escaped the immediate danger, the Vultures were relentless. If they discovered they were gone, they would stop at nothing to track them down. Cale couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and determination. His life had already been torn apart by these invaders, and he wasn't about to let them win. They continued their trek through the forest, the only sound being the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the distant calls of strange creatures hidden in the trees. Cale's mind raced as he tried to piece together everything that had happened. He had been captured by the Vultures only to be saved by Tessa. Now he was following her through a dangerous wilderness with no clear idea of where they were going or what awaited them. "So, what's the deal with you?" Cale asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "I mean, you seem to know a lot about the Vultures, and you're not exactly new to all this, are you?" Tessa's pace didn't falter, but Cale could sense a shift in her demeanor. She was silent for a moment, as though weighing whether or not to answer. Finally, she spoke, her tone low but honest. "I've been fighting these kinds of wars for a long time," she said. "I've seen the way the galaxy works, and I've seen what happens when people are left to fend for themselves. The Vultures, the other alien empires, they think they can just come in and take whatever they want, but I'm here to stop that." Cale absorbed her words in silence. He had never really thought about it that way. He had always focused on survival, on getting through each day. But Tessa was talking about something much bigger. She was talking about a fight for something more than just personal survival. She was fighting for freedom, for a future where humanity wasn't just a victim. "Why me, though?" Cale asked, his voice still tinged with confusion. "Why did you save me?" Tessa turned her head just enough for Kale to catch the flash of a small smile on her face. "Because, Kale, you're a part of something bigger than yourself. You just don't know it yet." They walked in silence for a while longer. Kale couldn't help but think about what she had said, a part of something bigger. He had always thought of himself as just another soldier, another survivor. But maybe Tessa was right. Maybe humanity was more than just a collection of individuals. Maybe they were capable of something greater, something the galaxy hadn't seen before. The forest began to thin out ahead of them, and Kale could see the edge of a small clearing. Tessa slowed her pace, her eyes scanning the area. She was looking for signs of danger, as if she could sense something he couldn't. They stopped just inside the clearing, and Tessa crouched low to the ground. Kale followed her lead, his senses on high alert. He didn't know what was out there, but he knew they had to be careful. "I'm going to make contact," Tessa whispered. "Stay here and stay quiet. Don't move unless I say so." Kale nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to expect, but he trusted Tessa. He had no choice but to trust her. Tessa moved with practiced ease, slipping out of the clearing and into the underbrush beyond. Kale waited, barely breathing, his eyes fixed on the spot where she had disappeared. Time seemed to stretch as he waited in silence, every muscle tense, every nerve on edge. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Then he heard it, a faint hum in the distance, the sound of something mechanical. It was low at first, but it grew louder as it approached. Kale's heart skipped a beat. Was it an enemy patrol, or was it Tessa's contact? He didn't have to wait long to find out. From the trees, a ship appeared, small, sleek, and dark, designed for stealth. It hovered just above the ground, its engines making only the faintest sound as it settled into the clearing. Kale's breath caught in his throat. This was it. The ship was their way out. Tessa stepped into view, and with her came a group of other humans, more resistance fighters, Kale realized. They were armed and ready, but there was something about them that felt different. They weren't just soldiers, they were a family, united by something bigger than the war they fought. They moved with purpose, each one understanding the gravity of what was at stake. "Kale," Tessa called to him, waving him over. "This is our ride, come on." Kale hesitated for a moment, taking in the sight of the ship and the group of resistance fighters. He had always been on his own, surviving by his wits and his strength. But now he realized he wasn't alone, and for the first time in a long while he felt a spark of hope. He walked toward Tessa and the ship, his steps more confident than they had been in days. The Vultures had taken so much from him, but now he was taking something back. He was taking a chance at a future, one where humanity didn't just survive but thrived. As he boarded the ship, Tessa nodded at him. "Welcome to the fight, Kale," she said, her voice steady. Kale looked around at the faces of the other fighters. They were all so different, yet united by a single cause. They were all human, and that made them stronger than anything the Vultures could throw at them. "This is just the beginning," Kale muttered to himself, more determined than ever. The battle wasn't over yet. And as long as there was breath in his lungs, he would fight. The ship lifted off the ground with a soft hum, the engines barely making a sound as it ascended through the forest canopy. Kale sat in one of the seats, still adjusting to the strange, smooth surface beneath him. The interior of the ship was minimalistic but efficient. There were no unnecessary decorations, just a functional layout with places for the crew to work, sleep, and stay in constant motion. Tessa stood near the front, speaking with a few of the other crew members. She glanced over at Kale, who was still trying to process everything. The planet they had just escaped from was now far behind them, but the memories of being captured by the Vultures and the fight that followed were fresh in his mind. He had survived, but he knew the hard part was still ahead. The ship continued to gain altitude, the view outside slowly changing as the green forests and rocky terrain of the planet gave way to the blackness of space. Kale's gaze was fixed on the window, the endless stretch of stars above him. He had always been taught about the vastness of space, but seeing it with his own eyes was something else entirely. He had never imagined he would be flying in it, much less escaping from one of the most dangerous groups in the galaxy. Tessa moved toward him and sat down in the seat next to him. She didn't say anything at first, letting the silence between them stretch. Kale looked over at her, unsure of what to say. He had a million questions swirling in his mind, but none of them seemed to have answers. Tessa seemed to know more than she had let on, but she wasn't sharing everything. Kale had learned that much already. "You're quiet," Tessa said, her voice breaking the silence. She gave him a small, knowing smile. "Something on your mind?" Cale hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, a lot, actually." He shifted in his seat, trying to find the right words. "I don't get it. Why me? I'm just one person. There's nothing special about me." Tessa's expression softened, and she leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms. "That's what everyone says at first, but the truth is, Cale, it's not about being special. It's about what you're willing to fight for. It's about the choices you make when the world tells you to give up." Cale looked out the window again, trying to process her words. He had always fought to survive, to make it through each day. But Tessa was talking about something else, something bigger. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Cale admitted, his voice quieter now. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing." Tessa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she just watched him, her eyes sharp and understanding. Finally, she spoke. "You're already doing it. You survived, didn't you? You made it this far. That's more than a lot of people could say." Cale shifted in his seat again, feeling the weight of her words. He had survived, yes, but he wasn't sure if that was enough. It wasn't just about making it through one battle. It was about something much bigger. Something he wasn't sure he was ready for. As the ship continued to move through space, the hum of the engines grew louder, filling the cabin with a constant, comforting sound. Cale closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. He felt the tension in his muscles begin to ease, but the anxiety in his mind remained. "You're not alone in this," Tessa said, her voice a steady anchor in the sea of thoughts swirling in Cale's mind. "There's a whole group out there, people just like you, fighting for a future where we aren't at the mercy of the Vultures or any other empire. You're part of that fight now." Cale opened his eyes and looked at her. "I don't even know where to start," he confessed. "I've never been part of something like this. I don't know how to be a leader or even how to fight for something more than just surviving." Tessa smiled, though there was no humor in it, only a quiet strength. "You're already leading. Just by being here, by staying alive, you're showing others what it means to fight. You don't have to have all the answers right away. You just need to keep moving forward." Cale nodded, though he still wasn't sure if he truly understood what Tessa meant. But her confidence was contagious, and for the first time since he'd been captured, he felt a small flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As the hours passed, the crew moved around the ship, preparing for whatever came next. The journey was far from over, but for the moment, Cale allowed himself a brief moment of peace. He didn't know what would happen in the coming days, but he knew one thing: he wasn't alone anymore. The ship's lights flickered, signaling that they had entered a new sector of space. The view outside shifted again, the stars growing even brighter as they neared their destination. Cale watched in awe as the vastness of space opened up before him. He had no idea what was waiting for them, but he knew that whatever it was, he was ready to face it. Tessa stood up and moved toward the cockpit. "Stay here," she said, her tone serious. "I'll be back in a moment." Cale watched her go, his mind still buzzing with questions. He wanted to ask her more, wanted to know everything about the resistance, about the fight they were about to join. But he also knew that this was only the beginning. He had a lot to learn, and he would have to be ready for whatever came next. The silence in the ship seemed to grow heavier, and Cale leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. For a moment, he allowed himself to think about the past, the days before the Vultures, before the war, when life had seemed so simple. But those days were gone now. The world had changed, and so had he. He had no idea where this journey would take him, but one thing was clear: he was no longer just a survivor. He was part of something greater, a fight that wasn't just about surviving, but about winning. As the ship sped through space, Cale's thoughts turned to the future. He didn't know what would happen when they reached their destination, but he knew he would face it head-on. No more running, no more hiding. The fight was just beginning. The ship had been in space for several days now. The stars outside had become a constant backdrop, and the silence of space felt both comforting and eerie. Cale had grown accustomed to the hum of the engines, the steady rhythm that was almost like a heartbeat for the ship. But his thoughts were far from steady. He sat in one of the crew's quarters, staring out of the small porthole. The ship was moving steadily toward their next destination, but the unknown still loomed. Where were they going? What was waiting for them? These questions spun in Cale's mind, but he had no answers. He had learned to survive, to fight when necessary, but he had never been part of something like this. A resistance, a movement to change the balance of power in the galaxy. He didn't know if he was ready for that kind of responsibility. Tessa had given him some space, letting him adjust to the new reality. She was always busy, organizing the crew and keeping everything running smoothly. Kale knew she had a purpose. She was here to lead the fight. But what was his role in all of this? He had no experience in fighting for more than just survival. He had always been a soldier fighting for his life, for the next breath. But this was different. It wasn't just about fighting the vultures. It was about changing the future, ensuring that humanity would not just survive, but thrive. "Kale, you're needed in the command room." Tessa's voice broke through his thoughts. It was firm, but not unkind. Kale stood up from his seat, stretching his stiff muscles, and made his way to the front of the ship. When he entered the command room, he was met by the rest of the crew. They were gathered around a large table, examining holographic maps and data. There were a few faces he recognized from the fight at the Vulture camp, but most were strangers to him. Still, there was a certain unity in the room, a shared purpose that Kale couldn't ignore. Tessa turned to him as he entered, her expression serious but welcoming. "We've got a situation," she said, motioning for him to sit. Kale took a seat at the table, trying to keep his nerves in check. He wasn't used to being in meetings like this. He was used to taking orders, not giving them. Tessa pointed to the holographic map on the table. "We've tracked a Vulture fleet heading toward one of the Resistance bases. If they get there first, we'll lose everything we've been working for. We need to stop them before they reach the base." Kale felt his heart skip a beat. The Vultures were ruthless, and he knew that if they reached the base, it would be the end of everything. "How do we stop them?" he asked, his voice steady despite the anxiety building inside him. Tessa looked at him, her eyes hard but determined. "We're going to need to get ahead of them, hit them where they least expect it. We've got a small window to strike before they arrive at the base. We'll need every hand on deck." Kale nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. He had always been a fighter, but this was different. This wasn't just about one man fighting for his life. This was about the survival of an entire people, the future of humanity itself. Tessa turned to the rest of the crew, giving them their orders. Kale listened carefully, trying to absorb everything. There would be no second chances here. They were going to attack the Vulture fleet before they could attack the base. It would be a risky move, but it was the only chance they had. After the meeting, Kale found himself alone in the ship's hangar, preparing for the mission. His heart was racing, but he tried to calm himself. He couldn't afford to let fear take over, not now, not when everything was on the line. He checked his gear, making sure everything was in place. He wasn't sure what role he would play in the attack, but he would do whatever it took. Tessa came in a few minutes later, her expression unreadable. She walked up to Kale, her eyes scanning him for a moment before she spoke. "You ready for this?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Kale took a deep breath. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. "I'll do my part." Tessa nodded, and for a moment they just stood there looking at each other. Then she smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Good," she said. "Let's make sure the Vultures know they picked the wrong fight." They moved quickly, preparing the ship for launch. The crew was already in position, and Kale could feel the energy in the air as they got ready to face the Vultures. There was no turning back now. This was it, the final push. As the ship launched into the cold void of space, Kale looked out the window, his mind focused on the task at hand. They were heading straight for the Vulture fleet. The plan was simple: get in, hit them hard, and get out. But even the simplest plans could go wrong. The ship's engines roared as they accelerated toward their destination. Kale's heart raced in his chest, but his mind was clear. He knew what he had to do. They had a chance to stop the Vultures, to protect the Resistance base, and to send a message to the galaxy. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. As they neared the Vulture fleet, Kale could see their ships on the horizon, massive, dark vessels that looked like predators lurking in the void. The Vultures had the numbers, but the Resistance had something they didn't: the element of surprise. Tessa's voice came over the intercom, calm and collected. "This is it. On my mark, we make our move. We hit them hard and fast. Stay sharp, stay focused." Kale tightened his grip on the controls, his eyes fixed on the Vulture ships. The countdown had begun. He could feel the tension building in his chest. This was it. There was no turning back. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Kale's mind was sharp, his body ready. They were close now. The Vulture fleet was within range. "Now," Tessa's voice came through the intercom, and Kale didn't hesitate. He fired the ship's weapons, targeting the nearest Vulture ship. The blast sent a shockwave through the space around them, and Cale felt the power of the strike as it hit the enemy ship. It was only the beginning. The battle erupted around them. The Vulture fleet responded immediately, their ships unleashing a barrage of fire. But the resistance was ready. They fought with everything they had, pushing forward with relentless determination. Cale's pulse raced as he engaged in the fight, firing his weapons and maneuvering the ship with precision. The Vultures were tough, but they were unprepared for the speed and agility of the resistance. Cale felt a surge of adrenaline as they pushed forward, the battle unfolding in front of him. He was no longer just fighting to survive. He was fighting for something bigger, something that could change the fate of humanity. He was part of something greater now, and that knowledge fueled his every move. The Vulture fleet began to falter. The surprise attack had thrown them off balance, and the resistance was making its mark. Cale could see the damage on the enemy ships as they began to retreat, unable to withstand the force of the resistance's attack. As the battle raged on, Cale knew they had won. The Vultures had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. But this victory wasn't just about defeating the enemy, it was about sending a message. Humanity was not going to be crushed. Humanity would fight back no matter the odds. As the last of the Vulture ships retreated into the darkness, Cale let out a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. The battle was over and they had won. The resistance base was safe, for now. Tessa's voice came through the intercom once more, calm and resolute. "Good work, everyone. This is just the beginning. We've shown the Vultures that they can't just take what they want. We're not going anywhere." Cale looked out at the stars once more, his mind filled with a sense of purpose he had never known before. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but now he knew one thing for certain. Humanity had a future, and he was going to fight for it.